I want you to understand who my wife is before I tell you what happened to her. She's the kind of woman who shows up early and stays late, who remembers that your mother likes decaf and your kid is allergic to strawberries, who will drive 40 minutes in a February snowstorm to drop off soup when you're sick, without being asked, without expecting a thank you. She taught elementary school for 22 years in a town just outside of Barrie, Ontario, and every September she'd spend her own money on classroom supplies because she didn't want any kid to feel left out. That's who she is. Her name is Vivienne, and I've been married to her for 31 years. Drop your city in the comments and tell me what time it is where you are. I always like to know who's listening. I'm 57 years old. I retired early from the trades, plumbing, mostly commercial work across the GTA, after a shoulder surgery that made it clear my body had other plans. Vivienne still had a couple years left before her own retirement, so for a while I was the one at home, keeping the house running, cooking dinners, walking the dog. It was a different kind of work, but honest work. I didn't complain. Our son, Marcus, no wait, I said I'd be straight with you from the start. Our son's name is Garrett. He's 33. He works in tech project management, makes good money, lives in a nice semi-detached in Oakville, with his wife Lindsay and their 2 kids, a boy who just turned 5 and a girl who's 3. We love those grandkids more than I can put into words. We do. That's important to understand, because none of what I'm about to tell you changed that. Not for a single day. Lindsay came into Garrett's life about 6 years ago. She's sharp, organized, very particular about how things are done. I'm not going to call her a bad person. I'll let the story do that for me. The trouble started small, the way it usually does. First time we noticed something was off was at Garrett's birthday dinner, 2 years after they got married. Vivienne had offered to bring dessert. She makes this lemon olive oil cake that Garrett has loved since he was a teenager. She'd been making it for his birthday every year since he was 12. Lindsay texted her the morning of the dinner, "Could you bring something more crowd-friendly? Not everyone likes lemon. Maybe just a box cake from the grocery store." Vivienne showed up with the lemon cake anyway. Garrett ate 2 slices. Lindsay didn't say anything else about it, but the pattern was there. Lindsay had a way of making requests that weren't really requests. They had the shape of suggestions, but the weight of instructions. And when Garrett was present for them, he'd go quiet. That was his way. He'd gone quiet as a teenager too, whenever he felt caught between people he cared about. I used to think that was a kind of diplomacy. Later I started to understand it differently. The summer before last, Vivienne and I had the grandkids up at our place in Innisfil for a long weekend. It's a small house right on the water, nothing fancy, just a place we've had for 15 years. We took the kids kayaking, made pancakes in the shape of moose, watched movies on the old couch with all the lights off. It was a perfect weekend. Those kids went home sunburned and tired and happy. About a week later, Lindsay texted Vivienne, not called. Texted. She said she'd noticed the kids had too much screen time at our place, and going forward she'd like us to follow their home routine when we had them overnight. She attached a document, a PDF, 3 pages, outlining nap schedules, approved snack lists, screen time rules, and a note at the bottom that said, "We trust you'll respect our parenting choices." Vivienne read it to me at the kitchen table. She read it twice. Then she set the phone down and said quietly, "I think I need to go water the garden." I didn't know what to say. So I said nothing. We followed the PDF. We did. Because we wanted to see those kids. And if following the rules was the price of that, we paid it. But Vivienne cried about it one night, when she thought I was asleep. I heard her in the bathroom with the fan on. I lay there in the dark and stared at the ceiling and told myself it would get better. It didn't. That October, Lindsay told us they were hosting Christmas dinner at their place. 22 people. Her parents, her sister's family, a couple of friends of theirs who had nowhere else to go. She mentioned, almost as an aside, that it would mean a lot to Garrett if his parents could help with the cooking. Vivienne said of course. She asked what she could bring. Lindsay sent a list. 16 items. Not suggestions, a formatted list, with notes beside each one indicating quantities and specifications. The tourtière had to be from scratch, full pastry, no store-bought shells. The butter tarts had to be classic filling only, no raisins, minimum 2 dozen. The roasted root vegetables had to include parsnips and turnip, not just carrots and potatoes like last time. There was a cranberry sauce that had to be made the morning of, not the day before, because Lindsay found refrigerated cranberry sauce watery. There were 2 soups, a potato gratin, a Yule log for dessert. The list covered a meal for 22 people, And then, I had to read this twice. There was a note at the bottom. If it's easier, you can start at our place around 7 a.m. and we'll have the kitchen ready for you. Garrett can pick you up on his way back from the gym. I sat with that for a long time. My wife, who had taught other people's children for over 2 decades, who had given every good thing she had to the people in her life, was being offered a 7 a.m. kitchen call at her son's house to cook a full Christmas dinner for 22 people. Like she was the caterer, unpaid. By appointment. I asked Vivienne what she wanted to do. She looked at the list on her phone. She didn't say anything for a minute. Then she said, "I don't want to cause problems." I said, "You're not the one causing problems." She looked up at me. "I just want Christmas to be nice." I said, "Me too." And I meant that. But nice for who? We didn't say yes that night. Vivienne said she needed a few days to think about it, which was unusual for her. She's not a person who overthinks things. But this had gotten to her. I could see it. She went to bed earlier than usual. She was quiet over breakfast. 2 days later, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my coffee when she came downstairs, tied her hair back, and said, "I've been thinking." I closed my laptop. She sat down across from me. She put her hands flat on the table, the way she does when she's made a decision. She said, "I don't want to spend Christmas morning at their house peeling vegetables." I said, "Then we won't." She looked at me. Carefully, "What do you mean?" I said, "I mean we won't. We can do whatever we want. It's Christmas." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Garrett won't like it." I said, "Garrett's 33 years old." She almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. I don't know exactly when the idea came to me. Maybe it had been forming for a while without me knowing it. But sometime over the next 48 hours, I started making calls. My buddy Ray, we've been friends since we were in our 20s, met on a job site in Mississauga, had moved out to British Columbia 3 years ago with his partner. He'd been telling us to visit for ages. His partner, Denise, ran a bed and breakfast outside of Kelowna in the Okanagan Valley. They had a guest room. They had a fireplace. They had a wine cellar, because this was the Okanagan. I called Ray on a Tuesday afternoon from the driveway so Vivienne wouldn't hear. "Can we come for Christmas?" I asked. He didn't miss a beat. "I've been trying to get you two out here for 3 years. Get on a plane." I booked the flights that evening. WestJet, direct from Toronto. December 23rd to December 28th. I paid for it on the card I use for big purchases, the one with the travel points we'd been collecting for years and never used. I booked us a nice dinner reservation in Kelowna for Christmas Eve. I found a bottle of the Okanagan Riesling Vivienne likes and ordered it as a surprise for when we arrived. Then I walked back inside and told her to pack for warm layers and good walking shoes. She stared at me. I said, "We're going to Kelowna for Christmas." She said, "What?" I said, "Ray and Denise, 5 nights, flights are booked." She didn't say anything. She just looked at me for a long time. Long enough that I started to wonder if I'd made a mistake. Then she sat down on the couch and put her face in her hands. I sat down next to her, put my hand on her back. After a moment, she lifted her head. Her eyes were wet. She said, "I didn't know how much I needed someone to just decide something." I said, "I know, we needed to tell Garrett." That part I wasn't looking forward to. I thought about calling him. I thought about texting. In the end, I drove over to Oakville on a Thursday evening, told him I needed to talk, and we sat at his kitchen table while Lindsay put the kids to bed upstairs. I kept it simple. I told him we wouldn't be available for Christmas dinner this year, that we had plans, that we'd love to see them before we left, maybe a quick visit the weekend before Christmas, and that we hoped everyone would have a wonderful holiday. Garrett looked at me the way he used to look at me when he was 15, and I'd told him something he didn't want to hear. Quiet. Processing. He said, "Mom knows about this?" I said, "It was a mutual decision." He said, "Dad, Lindsay's been planning this for months. She's counting on Mom too." I said, "I know what she's counting on." He stopped. I said, "Garrett, your mother is not the family caterer. She's my wife and she's your mother, and she deserved to be asked, not told, whether she wanted to spend her Christmas morning cooking for 22 people in someone else's kitchen." He looked at the table. I said, "We love you. We love those kids. This isn't about any of that, but it's also not going to happen." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Lindsay's going to be upset." I said, "That's between you and Lindsay." Drove home in the dark. The 401 was quiet for once. I had the radio on low, some country station out of Hamilton. I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not anger, not triumph, just stillness. The particular stillness that comes after you've said something true out loud. Vivienne was awake when I got home, sitting in the reading chair by the front window with a book she wasn't reading. She looked up. "How did it go?" I said. "He wasn't happy, but he heard me." She nodded. She went back to the book that she wasn't reading. Over the next 2 weeks, things were tense. Garrett texted a few times, short messages, factual. "How long are you in BC? Can the kids FaceTime with you Christmas morning?" We said yes to FaceTime. We said the trip was 5 days. We kept things friendly and short. Lindsay didn't reach out directly, but Garrett mentioned in one of those texts that she was frustrated by the situation. I didn't respond to that part. We had the grandkids over for an afternoon the Saturday before we flew out. We made gingerbread cookies, watched a movie, did a little Christmas Eve practice run with stockings we'd hung on the mantle just for them. The little one fell asleep on Vivienne's lap with a piece of cookie still in her hand. I watched my wife sit there, completely still, not moving so as not to wake her. That's who she is. The flight to Kelowna was on the 23rd, early morning out of Pearson. We were up at 4, which I usually hate, but that morning I didn't mind at all. Vivienne wore her good coat, the charcoal one she saves for occasions, and she had her travel book in her bag, and she looked 10 years younger than she had 6 weeks ago. Ray and Denise picked us up at the airport in their old truck, the one Ray's had since before I knew him, and we drove through the valley as the sun was just coming up over the hills. Denise had made chili for dinner, and there was a bottle of local Riesling already open on the counter. Christmas Eve, we ate at a small Italian place in Kelowna that I'd found online. Wood oven, candles, a wine list that took me 10 minutes to read. We ordered too much. We stayed until the place started closing around us. Vivienne had the seafood pasta and a glass of Pinot Gris, and she laughed at something Ray said so hard she had to put her fork down. I hadn't heard her laugh like that in months. Christmas morning, we FaceTimed the grandkids in their pajamas while they opened presents. The 5-year-old held up a toy he'd gotten and narrated every feature of it with the complete seriousness of someone presenting a product to investors. The little girl tried to eat a piece of wrapping paper. Vivienne laughed so hard the phone shook. We said goodbye and Merry Christmas, and then Ray made pancakes with Okanagan blueberries, and we sat on the porch with our coffee in the December air, which, by Kelowna standards, was almost mild, and we watched a pair of deer move along the edge of the property. Vivienne said, "This is the best Christmas I've had in years." I said, "Me too." We sat there for a while without talking, which is its own kind of conversation after 31 years. My phone buzzed around noon. It was Garrett. I let it ring. I looked at the screen and I thought about what would happen if I answered. I thought about what the conversation would be. I could hear it almost exactly. The background noise of 22 people, the stress in his voice, some version of "Can you at least talk to Lindsay?" I set the phone face down on the porch railing. Vivienne glanced at it. She knew who it was. She said, "You can answer it." I said, "I know." We both looked at the hills. He called again about an hour later. I answered that one. He sounded tired. He asked how things were out west. I told him about the deer. He told me dinner had been chaotic. He said the kids missed us. I said we missed them too. "We'll come down in January. We'll take them skating." He was quiet. Then he said, "Mom doing okay?" I looked over at Vivienne, who was sitting in the sun with her book, finally reading it. I said, "She's doing great, Garrett. She really is." He didn't say much after that, but there was something different in his voice, something quieter, and maybe a little more honest than I'd heard from him in a while. We said goodbye. We said we loved each other. We hung up. 2 weeks later, we went down to Oakville with 2 bags of Okanagan chocolates and some apple butter from a farm stand near Ray's place. We took the grandkids to the rink at Brawny Harbor. The 5-year-old kept falling and getting right back up, completely unfazed. The little one clung to the board and screamed every time she moved 2 inches, which somehow she thought was hilarious. Vivienne held her hand all the way around the ice, patient and steady, while the kid shrieked with joy. Lindsay and I stood by the boards and watched them. We didn't say much to each other. She didn't bring up Christmas. I didn't bring up the list. I don't know if Lindsay and I will ever be close. I'm not sure that's the goal, but I watched my wife out on that ice, laughing with those kids, and I knew something had shifted. Quietly, without drama, the way the best things change. Garrett skated up beside me, and we watched them together for a minute. He said, "She looks happy." I said, "She is." He nodded. He didn't say he was sorry, not in those words. But he stood there next to me a little longer than he needed to, shoulders close to mine, watching his mother and his daughter hold hands on the ice. Sometimes that's how it goes with the people you love. The apology is in the standing there. The acknowledgement is in the not looking away. Some things you have to say out loud, and some things you just have to do. You have to book the flight. You have to drive out in the dark and say the true thing at the kitchen table. You have to know that the person beside you has given enough, and decide that this time, this one time, they get to receive. Vivian taught school for 22 years. She drove 40 minutes in snowstorms. She read the PDF and cried in the bathroom with the fan on. She deserved a Christmas dinner with candles and too much wine, and a pair of deer on a hillside in the Okanagan. She got all of it.